This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha, one of your favorite channels on YouTube. And we're back at you this week with another great story. And you can see the title right there on your screen. My fiance dumped me after he saw me at a bar canoodling another guy. Oh my goodness. This woman, I have to tell you, is one of the most unlucky women in any of these stories you're going to see online. I mean, just the timing of what she did, it couldn't have been worse. Now, I don't feel sorry for her at all because it's 100% her fault. I mean, what she did. And on the flip side, her fiancé or boyfriend, whatever you want to call him, is one of the luckiest guys you're going to see online because for him, the timing couldn't have been better. So let's get into this story. And this is her original post. She says, my fiancé and I had been together for just over 7 years, living together for the past 4, and engaged for the last 3. He's 27 and I'm 26. For this, I'll be referring to us as Seamus and Sharon. Over the past year, our relationship had started to show some cracks of age, but nothing so serious we couldn't work through. Neither of us believe that legal marriage is necessary, although I would have been fine if he was agreeable. We feel a natural commitment is much more important than a legal document and plan to stay engaged and committed to each other for the rest of our lives. We also plan to start having kids within the next 12 to 18 months. Our problems stem from Seamus being a workaholic. This started impacting our intimacy. When we first met, we shared intimacy all the time, sometimes multiple times a day. Well, that's normal. That dwindled to 3 times per week around year 3. Then last year, it was more like 2. Now we're down under 2 and sometimes go more than a week without it. My desire for Seamus is as high as ever, but his desire for me had fallen off a cliff because of his work. He admitted the stress and exhaustion of his job was the problem, but didn't do anything about it. Last year, he got promoted to assistant manager. The new job came with a bump in salary. However, with the hours he puts in, he's making less per hour now than before. How is that a promotion? We've discussed this many times, but he said he's doing this for us and for our future family. Well, of course he is. He's a young man. He's getting himself started in life. He's building his career, and that needs to be his number one priority before getting serious with any woman. Seamus said he was working hard and saving so we can buy a house someday, and I'll be able to stay at home with our first child. Well, what more do you want? I work at a call center for a bank and hate it. While I appreciated his sacrifice, I was just asking for a little more of his time and affection. When I pressured him enough, things got better for a while, then he'd be right back working and I'd be the afterthought. Even when he was home, he'd be on his laptop doing something for the store or on a call with one of his employees or talking to a customer. It was just so darn frustrating. When he did get free time, instead of spending it with me, he liked to game and is a member of a couple gaming groups. He said gaming is a stress reliever for him and encouraged me to play, but I just wasn't into it. I know he still loved me deeply, but something had gone from our relationship and we seemed to be drifting apart. That brings me to the present. Like I said, I work in a large call center, and several of my coworkers are in open relationships or marriages and claim that it has really helped their love lives. One of my coworkers, call her Jessica, has talked to me extensively about this. A month or so ago, she shared with me that she and her husband were interested in starting an open partnership with Seamus and I. She confessed that she was very attracted to Seamus, and her husband thought I was really hot. I strongly rejected this, as we were friends outside of work, and it would be so creepy. Also, we work in the same department, which could cause tension and potential HR issues. After making this clear, she still brought it up on occasion. So, as such, our friendship has become more distant on my part, as I just saw her differently once I knew she had a thing for Seamus. We still eat lunch together sometimes, but we don't hang out after work anymore. Several weeks ago, Jessica told me that the IT guy who takes care of our department is in an open relationship with his wife. He's an attractive older guy, maybe late 40s, and is a very kind, soft spoken man and in really good shape. Oh, that's what she likes. Jessica told me I should talk to him if I was interested in exploring. I told her I'm not interested and that she is the one who keeps bringing it up to me. Well, several days later, this guy, I'll call him Taylor, comes over to me in the break room and asks if he could join me. I said sure, and he sat down. We were making small talk for a while, and then he proceeds to tell me that Jessica told him that I may be interested in exploring an open relationship. I was shocked, as I couldn't believe the nerve of Jessica to tell him something like this after our discussion. I told him not really, and explained that Jessica and several others have been tossing the idea around with me, but I'm not interested. He said I should think about it, as it's actually very healthy and can do wonders for your relationship. He said if I would ever be interested, he would be honored to take that journey with me. Man, that is a roundabout way of saying, hey, I want to you. I was somewhat offended by this, but he did it in such a manner that was so calming and thoughtful. I didn't take offense. No, of course not, because you liked it. I just smiled and told him thanks. I'll keep that in mind if I ever change my mind. We went back to having small talk for the rest of the break. That afternoon, I kept thinking about my discussion with Taylor and thought to myself, if I were ever to get into an open relationship, he would be the perfect guy to do it with, as he's very mature and very respectful. He's also married with kids, so there's no chance of anything developing beyond, as he made it clear that he loves his wife and kids. Well, that's a hell of a way of showing you love them, by going out and having relationships with other women. I, of course, feel the same way about Seamus. He's my soulmate. Oh, here we go with the soulmate stuff. And even if we ever did something like this, my love for him would never change. When I went home that night, Seamus called and said he'd be working until 8:30, as he had someone call out sick last minute. I was so upset by this, as he was supposed to be home at 5 and we had plans for a romantic dinner and special evening. He apologized and promised to make it up to me when he got home. That night he didn't get home until after 9, and when he did, he was beat and just crashed on the couch. I was so upset that I just left him sleeping on the couch and went to bed. He came and got into bed at 3 a.m. and kissed me, but I pretended to be asleep. I was just so angered by his utter disregard for me. The next morning he left for work early and gave me a quick peck on the lips, but I didn't kiss him back. Later that morning he called me to apologize again for last night, but then in the same breath said that his district manager made a surprise visit to their store, and he and his manager will be going out to dinner with him after work. So this woman is getting on this guy's case because he's working on his career. Men, never let a woman, especially you young men out there, never let a girl or a woman throw you off of your career track. Again, like I said before, that has to be your number one priority. If she's becoming an impediment to your career, you need to get rid of her. I hate to say it, you just need to get her out of your life if she's doing that. I sarcastically told him to tell me something I didn't already know. He asked me what I meant, and I told him, you getting home late. Tell me the last time you were home at a normal hour. He ended the call by saying he loved me, The only thing I said was, "All right, bye," and hung up. I was visibly upset, and I asked my manager if I could take an early lunch, and she okayed it. While in the lunchroom, Taylor saw me and came over. Here comes old Taylor again, working his way in. He's got his sights on this woman. He could tell I was very upset and sat down with me. He then talked to me in his calming voice, and by the end of my break I felt so much better. Before we returned to work, he asked me to join him and some of his IT coworkers at happy hour. He said it would be good for me to go and not spend time alone at home that evening. Feeling sort of obligated since he just cheered me up and made me feel so much better, I said yes, I agreed to go. We went to happy hour and shared great conversation. We talked extensively about his marriage and how he and his wife were going through something similar as Seamus and I. Taylor said opening their relationship saved their marriage, and they are still very happy to this day. Yeah, they're so happy that he's still out there running around trying to nail other women. We left happy hour, and after talking to Taylor, I felt tonight would be as good as any to pass this by Seamus to get his reaction. This is very similar to another story I did about open relationships probably a couple months ago. Seamus got home around 9, and I asked him how things went with his district manager. He said it went great. He then asked me how things went at the happy hour, and I told him it was fine, but I would have enjoyed it much more if he was with me. Sure you would have. I didn't dare tell him I was there alone, talking with another guy, even if we were just having innocent conversation. Yeah, talking about open relationships is an innocent conversation. When there was a pause in our conversation, I interjected and asked him if I ever told him that 5 people I work with are in open relationships. He said I didn't and asked if this is where people sleep around with other people but still stay together. I said, yeah, something like that. He said that was stupid and disgusting, and they should just break up, then they would be free to sleep with whoever they want. I told him that was not the intent of these relationships. The intent is that these relationships would help bring a couple closer together. He said that was ridiculous and asked me how that could be so. I didn't have an answer. I then told him about Jessica and her husband. He asked if I was joking, and I said no. He asked me why I didn't tell him this before, and I told him I was afraid you wouldn't want to hang out with them. He said, you're right, I won't be hanging with them anymore, as that is just nasty. After hearing his response, I wanted to quickly drop the subject, but he started peppering me with questions about it. He asked me what I thought about this, and I said, if it works for them, then fine. He then asked me if I would ever do something like this, and I said only if he would. He then clarified saying, you're telling me if I'd agree to doing something like this, you would do it? I said yes, but only, she says in capital letters, if you agree to it. He just said, wow, okay, and gave me kind of a strange look. Of course he gave you a strange look because he was repulsed and shocked at what you were saying, I'm sure. That was the end of our conversation as he got a call from his dad and talked to him about something for nearly 20 minutes. When he got off the call, we started making out and enjoyed a special night together for a change. Over the next week, Seamus worked past 7 every night as he had an employee resign suddenly without notice. Frustrated, here she is again, she's frustrated with him working, I decided again to go out for a drink with who? With Taylor. We went right after work and I stayed until 7. We talked extensively about open relationships and how that might work between he and I. I will admit the conversation did stray into some very sensitive areas that crossed the line. Well, ma'am, you crossed the line as soon as you started meeting with this guy and keeping it a secret from your boyfriend or fiancé. That's where you crossed the line. She says, but nothing more occurred other than the conversation. I ordered takeout from the bar for Seamus and I and went home. I didn't tell Seamus I was with Taylor at the place where I ordered the food. For the next week, things were going well for Seamus and I. He was still working late, but at least he was getting home before 7. We had plans for Thursday evening to go out to a nice dinner to celebrate our 7th year of being together. Then the night before, Seamus comes home and tells me that his regional manager is coming in tomorrow and has scheduled a surprise ops review with them. So a couple weeks ago, he had his district manager. Now this week, he's got his regional manager. And that's not too uncommon in that industry, in the retail industry. He apologized, but said we'd have to move our anniversary celebration back to Friday. He could see I was upset, but I told him, okay. He also said he'd need to spend the rest of the night in our home office to prepare for tomorrow and would not be able to spend the night watching TV with me as we had planned. I was extremely upset and just generally frustrated by this whole thing. The next morning he got up before 5 and was out the door by 6. He kissed me and said he would likely not be home until after 9, as the RM, the regional manager, was planning on taking him and his manager out to dinner. I said, okay, that's what I expected. I then asked him if he promised to take me out tomorrow, and he said yes, that no matter what, he'd be home at 5 o'clock tomorrow. We kissed again, and he left. All day at work, I was stewing over the thought of spending another evening alone. You see how selfish she is? Right as my shift was ending, I got a chat message from, guess who? Taylor, asking if I'd like to join him for a drink after work. I thought about it for a while before responding and agreeing to go. I went home first to freshen up and met him at the tavern a little after 5. Why did you go home to freshen up? Because you're interested in getting with this guy. She says we ended up staying until almost 8:30. So they were talking to each other at this tavern for 3.5 hours. Yeah, she has stepped way, way over the line. While I was at the tavern with Taylor, Seamus texted me and asked, "Where are you at?" I just replied that I was at the tavern with some people from work, which technically was true, as there were a couple people from the loan processing department sitting at the bar. I texted him back and asked how things were going with his RM, and he said fantastic, absolutely fantastic. I replied, great, see you later, with a little love heart. I'll admit some of the conversation Taylor and I had that evening was highly inappropriate and personal. We talked about things like preferences, positions, and other such topics. You talk about highly inappropriate? Yeah, that was highly inappropriate. Towards the end of the night, he started rubbing and holding my hands until I drew them back. Then, when he walked me to my car, he gave me a long hug, and when he let go, came in and gave me a kiss on the lips. That was a complete surprise. Though I didn't say anything at the time, I think he read my body language and knew I didn't appreciate it. I left for home and was looking forward to seeing Seamus and talking to him about his meeting and dinner with his regional manager. When Seamus came home, he acted normal, except that he didn't come over to kiss me like he normally did. I asked him how things went with his regional manager, and he said they were great and didn't say anything more. He then asked me how work was today. I told him it was like it normally is, non-stop calls and total stress. He then asked me how was the happy hour and who was all there. I told him it was okay and that it was just a bunch of people from IT who he'd never met. He then asked me how many people attended. I said, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9, something like that. I felt uncomfortable lying, so I asked him how was his dinner. He said they didn't have dinner. He said his regional manager decided to fly back home early to see his wife and told Seamus and his manager to do the same with their significant others since they did so well with the ops review. My heart sank hearing this. I then asked where he'd been until now. He said, "At the tavern, looking for you." I immediately felt sick and knew I was caught, but wasn't completely sure. But then Seamus said he saw everything. I asked him what he meant, and he said, "I saw you with that man, smiling and staring at each other. I saw you holding hands. I saw you hugging and kissing him." I couldn't think of anything to say, so I just said, "You don't understand." He said, "No, I do understand. Now it all makes sense why out of the blue you asked me about an open relationship last week. You wanted clearance to sleep with this guy." He asked me how long I've been cheating on him, and I told him I hadn't cheated on him, and we hadn't done anything other than talking. "Well, you just said you hugged him and you kissed him and he was holding your hands, so you did do more than talking." I told him I was sorry. He told me sorry will not work this time, saying with his voice cracking that I had broke his trust and broken his heart. I felt so terrible and started crying. Well, of course you started crying and apologizing, but he didn't want to hear it. He said he was leaving to stay with his dad for a while. I asked him not to go and started begging for his forgiveness. He wasn't having it. He left and I called him on the way over to his dad's house. He told me he's not ready to talk now, that he needed to be away from me to figure things out. I asked him what that meant, and he said, "You know what that means." I continued saying I was sorry and begging for forgiveness. He wasn't answering me and eventually just ended the call without saying goodnight. I then went into the bedroom and noticed that most of his clothes were gone except for a couple old winter coats, a few ball caps, and an old pair of shoes. Apparently he had already packed his things before I got home and then went somewhere until I got home. That's why he came in after I did. I just broke down on the bed and kept praying that this was all just a nightmare. I sent him texts daily saying how sorry I was and how remorseful I was about what I did and that I loved him. The messages were delivered, but he didn't respond back to me. I was feeling so depressed that several of my girlfriends from work came over on Saturday evening to cheer me up. They took me out later that night, and for the first time in nearly 8 years, I actually got dirty drunk. Now, that's the thing you definitely want to do. You're trying to get your boyfriend back and prove to him you're a good woman, and yet you're going out on a girls' night out and getting dirty drunk, as you call it. Come on, woman. I was sleeping it off on Sunday morning when I heard someone knocking at the door. I looked out and saw it was Seamus. I was so happy to see him, but thought, why didn't he just open the door with his key and come in? When I opened the door, I hugged him and told him how much I loved him and missed him and how depressed I'd been since he'd left. He asked me to sit down as he had something to tell me. I started apologizing and he told me he doesn't have time to waste on that, as his dad was waiting for him outside in the car. He then told me that he had been promoted to store manager. I told him that was great and gave him a big hug. I told him I was so proud of him as he had worked so hard and no one was more deserving of this than he was. You've been nagging this guy about putting in the hours and working hard, and now you're acting like, oh, you were all part of it and encouraging him and no one's more deserving than him. We don't buy this. We can see right through what you're doing. He then said the store he'll be managing is in another state and he'd be moving away in 2 weeks. I was devastated and asked if he was taking me. He said, "No, I'm breaking up with you." I started crying and asking why, and he told me, "You know why." I asked him what I was going to do, and he told me that I'd have to figure that out. He then told me that he'd already terminated the lease on our apartment. The rental manager agreed to reduce the remaining 8 months of the lease down to 60 days. Apartment rents in our area have gone way up since we signed, and the landlord will quickly rent it at a higher rate. Seamus said he paid the final payment, but if I wanted to stay here after 60 days, I'd need to sign a new lease. He knew I couldn't afford to live here without him, as he paid 2/3 of our living expenses. He told me I could keep all the furniture and the commitment ring he gave me. I cried and begged him for another chance, but he just kept saying, "No, it's over." I ran to the bathroom as I thought I was going to throw up, and when I came back out, he was gone, so he split the scene. I called him and he told me that his dad was waiting and he had to leave. I kept trying to talk to him, but he said he had to go. I spent the rest of the morning on the bathroom floor crying and puking my guts out. Two girlfriends from work came over in the afternoon and they could see I was in a very bad way. They asked for my mom's number and called her and told her that I needed her as Seamus had broken up with me. Mom drove 3 hours and arrived late last night, Sunday evening. It's now early Monday morning and I have been a restless wreck all night. So here I am putting my thoughts on paper to get any input on what I should do next. Is there anything I can do to make this right? No. She says, I know technically I cheated on Seamus, just talking to Taylor behind his back, but we didn't do anything beyond a kiss and a hug. And remember, he kissed me. I didn't kiss him back. I learned my lesson and would never do anything like that again. If Seamus gives me another chance, I will never let him down. I'm at the lowest point in my life now and could really use some love and support. Thanks for reading this. Let me know if you have any questions. Sharon. So that's her original post. And now for a few responses from the community. But before we do that, I want to encourage you, if you're liking what you hear so far, be sure to hit that like button. That will help get this video seen all over the world. Now let's get back to the story and take a look at the responses she got. The first one's from a woman. She says, "Hi Sharon, sorry to say this, but your relationship with Seamus is over. The only advice I can give you is to learn from this and do better next time. You didn't support him in his career, bingo, and you proved to be untrustworthy, bingo. Those are two basic needs men have of their partners. Lucky for you, you're young and can start over. I hope you find another Seamus out there." Good advice from this woman. The next one's also from a woman. Now, she takes a different focus here. She goes after this Taylor, the guy that was pursuing her for the open relationship. She says, if Taylor kissed you without your consent, that is criminal, and you should consider filing a report. Also, go to HR about this. I'm sure your company has policies on preventing creeps like him from building their harems on company time. Finally, call his wife and tell her what he's been up to. I bet she knows nothing about them being in an open relationship. And here's another one from a woman. She says, I'm afraid Seamus is going to be your one that got away man. Most of us gals have a guy like that. The guy we were meant to be with, but something happened that caused things not to work out for one reason or another. For me, it was something stupid that I did, which I still beat myself up for 20 years later. Yeah, you probably cheated on the guy or did something similar. I'm happily married now. Listen to this, guys. Listen to this closely. She says, I'm happily married now, but deep down, my heart is still with that guy. So she's married probably to some nice guy that she settled for, but her heart, like she says it, and other body parts are still with that other guy. And if that other guy should ever happen to come around and say, hey, would you like to maybe rekindle what we had? You can be sure she would drop everything and get right on him. Believe it, guys, this kind of thing is more common than you think. And then finally, we got a response from a guy. He says, your idea of an open relationship was just a free pass for you to cheat guilt-free with this Taylor guy. Throughout your whole story, it was all about you, Nothing about your fiancé except you appreciated his sacrifices, but women like you are not marriage material. My advice to you is to stay single and live it up. Buy a couple cats and a Subaru and enjoy your old age with your peers. This guy is really going after her, but what he's saying is very truthful. And now for the final update. And this was 74 days after her original post. She says, "Hi everyone, I'm back because so many of you have inquired. I'm in a really bad place now and I'm living back at my parents' house." Here's another one who betrayed their boyfriends or their spouses and they're back living with their parents. "After the lease expired, I left my job at the bank and my dad, mom, and brother helped me move all my stuff back home." Yeah, I bet your mom and dad are glad to have you and all your stuff back at their house. It's currently in the garage. To say I'm broken now is beyond an understatement. I don't know how I could feel any worse mentally. Without my family, I don't know where I'd be right now. I may not be here. You know what that means. I just have so much regret and wish I could go back in time and do things over. All these cheaters wish they could have a time machine, but that has not been invented yet, folks. So guess what? Your relationship is truly over. In hindsight now, I see things so clearly and realize everything I foolishly gave up. Well, it's too late. To make matters worse, a week before I left to come back home, I ran into Seamus's father at the gas station. I always got along with him and we talked for about 15 minutes. During the conversation, he told me that Seamus came looking for me at the restaurant that night I was with Taylor to tell me about his promotion and to ask me to go with him. Hearing this, I just lost it. That's what I said up front, guys. The timing for this woman, she had to be the most unlucky cheater in the history of cheating because she cheated at the very moment when this guy, her fiance, was coming to ask her to go with him and move out of state. Unbelievable. I've talked to Seamus a couple times by phone since we moved. He said he's very happy and loves his new job, though he's been super busy. Yeah, I bet Seamus feels a load of relief off of his back since he doesn't have you nagging at him all the time about how much he's working. She says I've apologized to him and he accepted my apology and thanked me for all the great years we spent together. He had made it clear that as far as he's concerned, we are not compatible and will never be a couple again, but wants to remain civil. That's very smart, Seamus. Very smart. Always remain civil because the best revenge you can get is living a good life, which he obviously is now, and treating her with indifference. Like you don't care one way or the other, but you wish her well. Thank her for all those years you were together, but hey, you know what? I'm on to the next chapter in my life, and I hope you do the same. This hurts more than you can imagine, but I'm not pushing him or acting needy. I'm just thankful he's still talking to me. On the last call we had a couple weeks ago, I told him if he ever changes his mind that I will be on the next flight out there. Well, that's about all I have for now. I'm going for my first therapy session next week. There's another stereotype. All of these cheaters who are trying to repent, what's the first thing they do? Oh, I got to get myself in therapy and work on myself. She says, and I have put my application in at several places this past week. Keep me in your prayers and thank you all for the support and understanding you've shown this total stranger, Sharon. So that's her story. And again, like I said, she probably couldn't have picked a worse time to step out on her fiancé than what she picked because she blew pretty much the rest of her life. Well, first of all, she shouldn't have cheated in the first place. Let's face it. And some people out there may say, well, she didn't really cheat. She was just talking, dirty to this guy. And yeah, she went out with him to happy hour a few times, but they didn't do anything physically. I might forgive her. No, no, no. She was just one step away from doing something physical. And guess what? She is untrustworthy because she was going behind this Seamus's back, meeting this guy for drinks multiple times without telling him, and was having all this dirty talk with him. That is cheating just as much as doing something physical is. So, those are my thoughts. Now let's take a look at a few of the morals of this story that I picked out. Number one, and I've said this a couple times throughout the story, as a young man, establishing your career must be your number one priority. Nothing else should ever get in the way of your vocation in life. As a young man at that age, you've got to establish yourself because that's going to give you a platform for the rest of your life. If you are in a relationship with a woman, she should support your career objectives and help you reach them. If she doesn't and becomes an impediment, like this Sharon did with Seamus, then you need to end that relationship because she's not going to get you to where you need to go. In fact, she's going to impede you from your goal. And then finally, as we've talked about on numerous videos, these open relationships are just a guilt-free, free pass to let your partner cheat. Don't ever, ever fall for this nonsense, guys. If your significant other ever brings up an open relationship, you know what I would say? What are you talking about this for? Do you want to get into an open relationship? Oh, you do? Okay. Oh, you're interested? Oh, you were just curious about it? Guess what? I'm not, and this relationship's over. So those are my thoughts on this story. Now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? Do you consider what she did cheating? I, for one, do, because she was sneaking around behind this guy's back. She was meeting with this guy, planning on having relations with him, let's face it. They were hugging, they were kissing, regardless of what she says. Like the story title says, they were canoodling. To me, that is as bad as physically cheating. But I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on that? Would you have left her like this guy did? Have you ever been in a situation like this, where a woman tried to throw you off your career track, saying, oh, you're working too much, you're not paying enough attention to me, you need to focus more on me, and maybe you gave up your career for this woman? Tell us about that, or tell us about any other experience like this you may have had. And if you like this video, like I said before, be sure to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you on the